This is Cheryl Todd of Gun Freedom Radio.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd, reminding you that we and the show you are listening to are proud members of the Self-Defense Radio Network.
Find out more and check out all of the other great shows and content at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, living proof that without practice, there's no limit to how little you can accomplish, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear, where we counter the media's negative image of gun culture by introducing you to the amazing men and women who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. We're focusing on people, not politics. The everyday people from all walks of life, men and women who volunteer their time and effort, who spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. They're your doctors. They clean your teeth. They're fixing your houses, taking care of your pets. They fix your computers and pilot your planes, and they protect our streets and our nation. They are gun culture at its finest, and it's misunderstood or completely unknown to the mainstream media. Today, I'm going to introduce you to another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. I'm really excited and honored to be able to say that today's show is brought to you by the Blue Bullets. Why am I so excited? Well, for one, the Blue Bullets make cost-effective, quality bullets specifically designed for competitive shooters. Two, they're big supporters of the shooting sports because they're competitive shooters themselves. And three, because I'm a customer and I believe in their products. Using their own polymer-based liquid coating that they mix in-house, Blue Bullets are designed to prevent barrel leading, to reduce smoke, and yet they're priced comparably to other uncoated lead bullets. And unlike uncoated lead bullets, the Blue Bullets are Glock safe. How did they do that? They did that by spending 6 years developing a coating and a process that ensures consistency and quality. I can tell you from my own experience that while I usually don't perform very well at matches, the Blue Bullets never let me down. Visit thebluebullets.com today. Tell them you heard about it on Unload and Show Clear by using this promo code BBUSC at checkout, and you will save 5% off of your order. The Blue Bullets, family owned and operated by competitors who know what you want in competition bullets. Check them out at thebluebullets.com. Our special guest today, somebody I've been wanting to talk to for a while, finally have got him here. He's on the phone with us today. He has got a 4-digit IDPA number. He joined IDPA in 98. And since then has won over 100 division championships in IDPA, USPSA, and Steel Challenge. Greg Martin from Green Forest, Arkansas, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here with you.
So for those who've been living under a rock and don't know, tell us a little about yourself. What are you doing for a living there in Green Forest?
Well, I actually work for Wilson Combat. It's kind of a long story, but I'll try and go through it. I'd always, as a younger man, had been interested in competitive handgun shooting, but just really didn't know how to go about it, didn't know anything about it, really didn't have the finances to do it at the time. And of course, I grew up in Berryville and, knew Bill Wilson, heard the name and knew all about him and his competitive career at the time, and I was always interested in it. And then one day I walked in, it was a Saturday morning, I walked into a local gun shop in Berryville, and there was a brochure for IDPA sitting there on the counter. Mm-hmm. I picked one up and was looking at it, and I was like, now this sounds like this would be right up my alley. I flipped over on the back side of it, and there was a name and a number stamped on it, and it was Carol Lawrence. And I knew Carol from back when I used to work construction. He drove a concrete truck. I poured concrete for a living, and I knew him through that. So I left the gun shop, went across town to my mom and dad's house, and called Carol. And he answered the phone and told him who I was and was asking him about IDPA. And he was like, well, we're all getting together to practice this morning. Why don't you come out and join us? And it just so happened that I had my 45 in my rig, had everything I needed to go out, even had, 1,000 rounds of ammo in my truck. So I was like, okay. And I went out and shot with them that day, and I was hooked. I mean, they had me hook, line, and sinker from the get-go.
What do you remember? Now we're going back to the early days of the sport. You said this was
IDPA had just, it started in 97, and this was in December of 97 when that first day I went out and shot with them. So they had won national championship just a few months before that, which was their first one.
Right.
So, yes, I was early on in the sport, and very glad that I became a part of it when I did.
Well, talk a little about that. Now, you said you were interested in competitive shooting before you heard about IDPA. You had a rig and your 45 in the car and 1,000 rounds. What were you planning on doing that day? Where did the interest in competitive shooting come from?
Well, you have to understand my dad was a huge gun guy.
Okay.
Huge. And I grew up, I can remember when I was like 6 years old, my dad took me to the range for the first time. We had a couple of 22 pistols, and he took me out, and we just threw some tin cans on the ground. This is like 1975, somewhere along in there. No, it was before that. This would have been even earlier than that because I was about 6. This would have been like 1972 or 1973.
Okay.
And he went through showing me what I needed to do. And, of course, these pop cans were only out there about 10 foot. They were close. And I couldn't hit them. I was getting frustrated. And finally, he explained to me sight picture. And then he said, you have to pull the trigger without moving the gun. He said, you just rest those sights, level them off. You put it right at the bottom of the can, and you just gently pull that trigger without moving it. Well, I did that. The gun discharged, and the can flew up in the air. And it was a light bulb going off in my brain moment. And from that point on, I was a firearms enthusiast from a young boy on. So I grew up shooting, and my dad was not a competitive shooter. He was an old school varmint hunter.
Mm-hmm.
He was all about accuracy. Fast follow-up shots, stuff like that. That didn't exist in his world. It was all about that first shot and putting it where it needed to be. So when I started shooting IDPA, I already knew how to fire an accurate shot. That was not a problem. I was a very accurate shooter. I just had to learn how to do it faster.
Right.
Learn all the gun manipulations, the reload, the draw, all that stuff, And I think that's an advantage that I had over a lot of people that have tried IDPA over the years and still shooting IDPA is when they started, they really didn't know anything.
So you came from being taught how to shoot accurately as a young boy, and you mentioned that makes me think. Looking through your resume, your history and at Wilson Combat's website, and so many times I noticed you were most accurate. So that has carried over. The accuracy part was always there. You just had to figure out how to speed it up and do accurate while moving at a high rate of speed.
Absolutely. And, it was one of those things that the first time I shot a classifier, my classification was sharpshooter. I just missed expert by just a second or two. And I really thought that, I could have easily made expert. So I was kind of disappointed. And then just another month later, we had another classifier, and I classified as an expert that time and had just barely missed master by 2 or 3 seconds.
Oh.
Then I had my first sanctioned IDPA match in May of 98, and that was the Arkansas State Championship that year. And I won expert class at that match and got bumped to master. So I started in mid-December basically as a sharpshooter, and by mid-May, I had went from beginner to master.
So you've been basically shooting at the master level in sanctioned matches your entire career almost.
But yes, every sanctioned match I've ever shot but one, I was classified as a master.
Oh my goodness. What was ID? I mean, we like to joke about how much the rules change, and that's one of the knocks on the sport sometimes by those who love the sport and those who don't. Talk about some of the changes for those who are newer to the game and are maybe their frame of reference is the 2017 rule book. What was IDPA like in 1998?
Well, it was really fun to shoot. And of course, I was hooked on it, and I was having the time of my life. And it was like, okay, it's one of them things. I don't do very many things really, really well, but I can do this, and I was just super excited about it. So I really didn't start paying attention to actually what was going on with the sport right away. Looking back on it now, for people who have started IDPA since we have the fault lines, I really wish we'd had fault lines from the very get-go with the sport, because I love IDPA. It's my favorite shooting sport and discipline. It's what I shoot the most of. And, not having fault lines was kind of the biggest controversy over the years until they changed that, because there was so many judgment calls. And back then, you didn't have to have both feet behind cover. I mean, literally, you could be at a wall and you could have one leg out and half your upper body. And that was considered behind cover at the time. And it made for some pretty easy shooting positions for the most part. Well, then they changed it to both legs 100% behind cover. And from that point on is when it kind of got controversial.
Right.
A lot of judgment calls on the range that, may or may not have been right. It might have been close, but, they saw the writing on the wall and they did what's right, and they implemented fault lines.
Yep.
And it is a tremendous asset to the sport in my mind.
Contrast now, you just finished shooting the world championship in Talladega just recently, and you've been to numerous what is this? This is your third world championship, I think. You've been to numerous national championships. Talk about how the sport has changed in terms of what you've seen from just the turnout and the quality of the sport.
Well, the first thing I would say is that the level of competition in IDPA is much, much higher today than it was 20 years ago. I mean, you had in 1998, 1999, you had about a half a dozen really good shooters, and you had about a dozen more that were pretty good, and that was about it, and today, the level of competition is through the roof compared to what it was when I started. There are a lot of really good shooters today. And as far as the matches itself, some of those early matches, the sanctioned matches, even the national championships and stuff, I mean, especially in 99 and 2000, I mean, they just threw some stuff together. It wasn't real elaborate. It wasn't, fancy looking. It was what it was. They threw some stuff together and we shot a match. Today, these match directors and people that design courses today, they put a lot more thought into it than they used to. You'd see a stage and basically everybody has to shoot it the same way.
Right.
You start here, you go to there, you go to there, you go to there, and that's what you did. And everybody done it that way. There was almost never a stage where there was multiple options on how to complete the stage. And that's something that I really like about IDPA, and I hope it keeps going the way it has been going the last 2 or 3 years, is that people are designing stages that have multiple ways to shoot the stage, whereas someone like me might want to stay back further, engage a lot of targets from a further distance without having to do a lot of movement.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's a sharpshooter might not be confident in their ability to hit those targets 25 or 35 yards away, so they run forward to another place where they can engage the targets from 10 or 15 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I really like seeing stages where there's multiple ways to complete the stage. And I'm hoping that that is a trend that will continue to carry on and kind of cover the nation.
Right.
There's a couple of people that's kind of got the ball rolling on that, and I really hope that that trend continues.
I usually like to ask people what they did to get better and what they did to improve, but that's kind of a hard question with you because you went to master like right off the bat and have been competing at the highest level ever since. Does it just come naturally to you, or is there still a lot of practice and a lot of training involved in maintaining those skills?
Early on, the first 7 or 8 years that I was involved in IDPA and competitive shooting, I shot all the time. I mean, we were shooting upwards of 1,000 rounds a week, practicing 2 or 3 times every week. I was shooting with Bill Wilson and Carol Lawrence and Ben Swallow and Jay Smith and Ed Steins and, just this group of guys. And we got together at least 2 times a week and practiced.
Mm.
It was, and that is really where I honed my skills and really where I got good. Everybody has to practice to a certain degree, whether it be dry fire, whether it's live fire on the range. But I will honestly tell you that in the last 10 years, I have practiced less than I did the 10 years before that.
According to your bio at wilsoncombat.com, you joined the Wilson Combat Team pretty early on, like 2000? Is that right?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when they started sponsoring me, but I think it was late 2000.
Do you even remember them approaching you or anything about how that, because that's very early on. The sport's not very old at that point. And did they approach you? Did they see you at a match somewhere? You were first place master in the Nationals in 99. You were third in 98. I assume they knew who you were. They saw you shooting. You were, like you said, you grew up in the same town.
Yeah.
Do you remember at all how that connection happened?
I do remember, and when I started shooting, when I went out with Carol that very first day in December of 1997, we were at Bill's range, and Bill was there.
Oh, okay.
So I had been practicing with Bill for the rest of that winter through the spring and shooting matches. In June, it was early June of 98, Bill offered me a job. He wanted me to come to work for him. And, of course, I jumped on that right away. And I think it was June 13th of 98, I started working for Wilson Combat full time. And I remember specifically when Bill first talked to me about shooting for the Wilson Combat banner and him, sponsoring me and all that. I had walked into the gun shop with a new 1911 that I had bought off another custom gun maker. And I was showing it to Bill. Bill looked at it and he was like, "Yeah, this is a nice gun. How would you feel about shooting for Wilson Combat?"
We can't have one of our employees out shooting with the competition's gear. That just doesn't look good.
Well, there was, I don't want to say that there was some reverse psychology taking place there, but there might have been. But, yeah, that's when Bill started talking to me, and we hashed it around for a little while, and he kind of showed me what he had in mind, and I, came back with, well, that all looks good, but how about this, this and this, and we kicked it back and forth for a few times, and we came to an agreement, and I signed my first contract with him, and I've never looked back. Wilson Combat, I can tell you this, there's not a whole lot of people, there's probably more than I think, but there's not a whole lot of people, as we grow up and you look back on things, there's big decisions in your life. It's like, okay, to go to college, to not go to college, to buy your first vehicle,
right?
To get married. A biggest decision I ever made in my life was to accept Jesus Christ as my Savior. And we did that a year into our marriage, my wife and I, and that will always and forever be the biggest decision I've ever made. But sometimes there's decisions that you make, and it's a big decision, like buying your first home or buying a piece of property or switching jobs, going from this career to that career.
Right.
But sometimes you make big decisions, and you don't realize at the time what a big decision it actually was or it was going to be. And that decision that I made on that December morning in 1997 to go out and shoot those guys, that decision literally changed my life and sent my life in a completely different direction that I never envisioned, never saw it coming. So here we are 21 years later, something like that, and 22 years later, and I am well into my career with Wilson Combat, and unless they run me off or I die early, I'm
don't say that
until I retire. And the shooting, the competition part, and it was my shooting that got me that job. That's what Bill offered me a job to do. The guy that was function firing and zeroing and targeting all his pistols that he was selling was moving to Arizona, and he needed somebody to replace him. And I jumped on that, and it went from that to building the pistols, and did that for years, and then moved around, did a few other things, and for the last 6 years, I've been doing final inspection on all the new handguns that come out of Wilson Combat. But my point is that sometimes we make decisions that, here was my plan was I'm going to go out here and I'm going to practice with these guys and I'm going to shoot the club matches and that's all it's going to be. I loved it. This is going to be great, Well, then, okay, let's go shoot this sanction match. Well, I can work as an SO at the national championship and get my entry fee paid for and my motel room paid for, so I can do that a lot. Okay, yeah, I can go do that. Well, I went to my first national championship and came in third place in CDP division. It's a decision that it completely changed the direction of my life, and I'm so thankful and humbled that I did that because the people that I have met over the years, Eric, he's like a brother to me. He's one of those guys that, you can call him just out of nowhere. Hey, man, I got a problem. This. He's like, all right, I'm on the way. That's how close we are. And so many good friends and just awesome people.
In December of 97, where did you see yourself? What was your what were you thinking life was going to be like going forward? What were your goals and career plans? And, what were you looking forward to in life? Just when you think back about what you thought your life was going to be like back then, where was 1997 Greg Martin thinking his career was going?
Well, I was just at the time, I was just kind of spinning my wheels. I mean, I was married, I had a family, and I was going to do whatever it took to provide for my family. My wife and I, when we started having children, we made the decision that, she needed to be a stay-at-home mom as much as possible. And for a lot of years, she was a stay-at-home mom with the kids, and I wouldn't change that for anything. But the honest truth is, it threw a severe financial burden upon us. Just being a one-income family all that time, and then getting my job at Wilson Combat, even though it didn't relieve that situation right away, it was just a couple, 2 or 3 years down the road before that situation did change.
Right.
And not only could I support my family, but we didn't have to live from paycheck to paycheck, robbing Peter to pay Paul, juggling our finances to make sure everything was met. I have no doubt that had I not made that decision, we would probably still be doing that same thing today.
Right. That is pretty cool. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned over the years that has improved your own shooting in the, like you said, what has it been, 21 years since you got started? What's the biggest lesson that you learned in all those years that has really made the biggest difference in your performance?
At the end of the day, and I don't mean this in a mean way, there's people that care about, like my teammates and my other friends that I've made over the years, At the end of the day, what every individual has to understand is that deep down inside, nobody else on that range really cares about how they perform or not. So I think people put themselves a lot of pressure on themselves because they're concerned about their performance. And the thing they have to understand is nobody's really rooting against them, but nobody's really rooting for them, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
And when I came to that realization that, at the end of the day, nobody really cares how Greg did except Greg. And that was a big enlightenment for me. And I like to think that I've got one of the strongest mental games in IDPA because, it takes a lot to get me flustered. It's not that it doesn't happen, but it takes a lot. Back early on, it didn't take much to get me flustered, and I'd wind up making a lot of mistakes and doing stupid things, that I shouldn't have done, and it was all because I was putting all this pressure on myself. Today, I'm one of the most laid-back shooters you could ever run into. I don't get wound up about it at all anymore. I love shooting matches. I love being there. But I've just learned over the years not to put pressure on myself and understanding that, at the end of the day, even though you're here with your team and there's friends and a lot of people, it's really, sure, they're going to feel bad if you do poorly, but not really. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They'll give their condolences or congratulations or whatever, but, at the end of the day, you are the only person on the range that cares about your performance.
Don't worry about what other people think. Okay.
Exactly. Don't worry about what other people think. And that has allowed me to, especially over the last 4, 5, 6 years, that has really allowed me to really kind of up my game a little bit.
So you have been very generous in giving your time to the show, and I really do appreciate you taking so much time. But I know you compete in the other things, but to continue to participate at such a high level, and what is it about IDPA that hooked you from the beginning and has sort of captivated you through all these years What is it you love about IDPA so much?
At the time when I started, it was with realistic guns. You know, the whole conception of the sport was to come out here and compete with gear that you would actually carry off the street, gear that you would wear in the mall to protect your family. You know, gear that you would wear to church, you know, things like that, wherever. And that was the basic concept of the sport. And that's why that I really fell in love with it, is that, you know, there was no race guns. There was no limited guns that was basically a race gun without the optic and the comp. You know, these were guns that you could walk into any gun store, and for $400, $500, $600, you could pick up a gun and a holster and 3 or 4 magazines and 3 or 4 boxes of shells, and you could go shoot this match at a club level. You know,
right?
That's really the simplicity of it. You know, it was just, it really appealed to me at the time. And, you know, now more so than the actual shooting itself, it's just, it's a big social event for me. You know, I know so many people, and, you know, when I get to a match, whether it's in, you know, Michigan or Colorado or Texas or Louisiana or Florida, you know, I'm always running into people that I know and people that I like. And, you know, and it's so good to be there and to visit with them and to get reacquainted with them, you know, and there's people that you're friends with on Facebook, and then you finally get to meet them for the first time face to face, you know. Yep. Now there's a voice, there's a character, there's this persona that goes with this person that was just kind of we're friends on Facebook, but I really don't know who this guy is, you know. Mm-hmm. And I love that aspect of it. Still love the shooting, I do, and I still love to win, you know. And hopefully I've got some more winning ahead of me, you know. The social aspect of it and the people is really what's important to me now, you know. Well,
Greg, congratulations on 21 years of outstanding shooting, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I've been looking forward to talking to you, and I have not had the pleasure of squatting with you yet, but you're right next door in Arkansas, and we run across each other on the range. So I know at some point it's going to happen. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Oh, I look forward to seeing you too. Thank you for having me on.
All right, I want to thank today's guest for coming on the show and sharing his story. He was very generous with his time, and the interview ran longer than normal. So if you would like to hear the full-length interview, join us on Patreon, and you'll get access to all the extra content. You could hear the rest of the interview, plus full-length interviews from guests like Bob Vogel and Julie Golub. Sign up for just $1 a month to support the show, and you get access to all the special episodes at unloadpodcast.com/extra. Thank you again for listening. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.